Hey guys, today I'm going to talk to you about choosing your words carefully, especially in an essay environment. While it is always essential to choose your words carefully, when you are writing an essay, you want to pay careful, close attention to the diction. Because when you are writing, you are presenting yourself professionally on paper. When you are writing information down, depending on what school you're going to or to whom you're writing, sometimes what you've written is the only part of you that the person you're writing to will ever see. Let's say you're writing an email to somebody whom you will never meet. Maybe you're writing a job application letter. Maybe you're writing a resume. Or maybe you're just writing an essay and you've got a large class. Maybe you're writing an essay and you've got a small class. But the way that you write, the words that you choose, the way you present yourself on paper makes a big difference in how the person who's reading that essay, your audience, understands what you've written, understands about your level of comfort and confidence in what you're writing, and just understands what you're writing. Okay? So there's some common pitfalls that novice writers especially, but many writers fall into, and we want to start talking about that today, right now. So let's do it. All right, diction is a fancy word for your word choice. Okay, it just means word choice. So this refers to how you elect to present yourself in writing on the page. In writing, we have three what's called levels of diction. There's high diction, which can be very fancy, middle diction, which tends to be more straightforward language, and low diction, which is not a place that you want to be when you're writing essays or emails or anything else. I find it easiest to classify these by sort of like dress codes. Okay, so high diction, I want you to think of as black tie diction. This is language that is on its absolute best behavior. Okay, so when we're talking about high diction, a lot of times when folks come to the page to write something, they feel the need to sound writerly, which means that they don't have confidence in how they sound in general as a writer. And so they go out and they find a thesaurus, a synonym finder, and they try to kind of like dress up their language, right, to make it look really nice. So let's think about this in the black tie realm. When you are invited to a black tie event, this means that it's a very fancy event. It doesn't mean that you reach into the closet to, maybe if you're a guy, grab a suit, or if you're a gal, grab a dress or whatever, and put it on and go to this event. It means that you are going to go to someone who sells nice clothes. So some folks are going to go out and get a tuxedo, right? Because not just a suit, but they're going to get the suit. This is a very fancy suit. And we're not just going to grab one off the rack and put it on and hope it works. We're probably going to go to a tailor. Okay, so a black tie event, this might be something like a White House dinner or maybe a very fancy wedding or something like that. So it's kind of a once in a lifetime event. We're going to get something that looks really nice and that fits us. Okay, it is tailored to the situation. Maybe we're going to go out and get a nice dress. Okay, we're not just going to grab a dress at Ross or TJ Maxx. We're going to go out and have somebody help us find a dress that makes us look good. And then we're probably going to get some alterations to make it fit us just right. We're not just going to grab shoes out of the closet. We're going to go buy a pair of shoes that matches the tuxedo that we've picked out or the dress that we've picked out. Some folks might go to an esthetician to help them get their hair just right and makeup. Maybe we're going to go to a barber or somebody who does a shave and we're going to get our hair cut. We're going to get a shave. Maybe we're going to get our shoes shined, that kind of thing. Okay. The important point here is black tie diction is tailored to the topic, the subject, the circumstance that it is in. So maybe this is a very thoroughly researched, I'm talking months, years, research paper. Maybe this is a novel. Maybe this is a very careful letter that's written to, say, a politician or a speech that's going to be delivered to a lot of people. And the other important part here is that we almost never reach black tie diction on our own. This is language and word choice that has been influenced by other people, by experts. A lot of times when we're writing and we feel like we need to be very writerly in our speech, it's because we've read books and essays and, whatever else that have been published, right? They've been released into the public realm by our favorite authors, and we're like, I want to sound like this person. You guys, you have to know that that person doesn't even sound like that person. They have editors who have worked with them extensively, sometimes for years, to get that sentence structure just right, to get the word choice just right. And going out and haphazardly choosing synonyms from a thesaurus can actually cause you more problems than it helps. We'll talk about that in a different video, okay? But don't rely on a synonym finder to make yourself sound fancy. In order to sound black tie, you have other people helping you and supporting you, like your instructor, like a writing lab professional, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of drafts to sound like that. So for your essays and for these smaller things that you're writing, nobody expects you to be wearing a tuxedo or a ball gown or a cocktail dress. They expect you to be in business casual attire. Okay, business casual, think about what you wear to your job. So if you've ever worked in like a customer service setting, you know that you need to have nice pants, maybe jeans on Fridays, but otherwise dress pants, right? Slacks, khakis, something like that. You're going to have a professional looking shirt. Maybe it is a polo shirt. Maybe it's just like a nice blouse or a plain t-shirt, something like that, that looks appropriate in a setting. It's not going to have, scary pictures on the front or obscure video game references, which can be fun, but not great in a business environment, right? Maybe it's going to be a nice button down shirt, something like that, that doesn't really say a whole lot about you. Okay, but it's something that somebody can recognize, and yeah, that looks nice. We're probably gonna have closed-toed shoes. We're gonna make sure that we take a shower before we go to work in the morning, right? That kind of thing. That's business casual presentation. Business casual language is the type of language that you use when you walk into a situation where you're not super familiar with your audience. You don't know them, they don't know you. You might get a sense that they have, they're open to hearing a cool story or something like that, but there are certain things that you want to stay away from. Okay, for instance, when I ask these questions in class, a lot of people right away, I can be like, what do you want to avoid? They're like, probably profanity, right? In an essay, you don't want to have a lot of profanity. You don't want to be swearing every 2 seconds because that just doesn't make you look professional. It doesn't make you look like you know what you're doing or like you care that much about what your audience is hearing. And it's not going to give you a good reputation with that audience. They're probably going to stop listening to you pretty quickly. Okay, profanity is very low. It's thought of as lazy, but actually profanity is housed in a different area of the brain than language. Profanity is actually an emotional response. It comes across when you're frustrated, excited, things like that, and your brain doesn't know quite what word to conjure in the moment, and so it gives you a curse word. Good writing, we kind of lean into that, not into the profanity, but into figuring out how to explain or describe those emotions or frustrations instead of presenting just a word that encapsulates how we feel about that situation or circumstance. So if you have a lot of profanity coming into what you write, really look closely at those areas and see if you can explain what you mean when you say that word, okay? All right, so slang is another thing. We're not going to be like, yo, so-and-so, it's nice to see you. How you doing today, right? If people even use yo anymore, I don't know. So we're going to greet them. Good afternoon, good morning, right? Something like that. Even if you've known the customer for a long time, you're not going to overdo the slang when you talk to them. Maybe a word or two, not a whole lot. Okay. Also, if you're walking into a new audience, you're probably not going to use a lot of sarcasm because they don't know you well enough to know what you're like when you're serious. So they also don't know you well enough to know what you sound like when you're sarcastic. if you're walking into a business casual setting, you're not going to be insulting people, right? You're not going to be calling them names. You're not going to be calling other people names. You're not going to be talking down and sassing folks over here because they might know those folks. They might like those folks, right? They might even be part of the group that you are insulting or whatever, even though you're not thinking about it that way. So you want to be careful with how you talk about other people and how you talk about other perspectives, things like that. You want to keep it in this nice, straightforward realm where you're concerned with the transaction at hand. If you've ever worked in customer service, you know that the customer doesn't want you to be talking about, like these people over here and gossiping and doing all this other stuff. They are there to get something done, and you're there to help them get something done. Okay, so in the case of an essay, let's say you're telling a personal story or even like a research paper or an analysis paper, you're there to get something done. You're not there to talk about people from other perspectives and how much you don't like them and how wrong they are and how much they suck. You're there to tell a story or talk about a very particular topic. Okay, don't talk about the people involved in that topic, just talk about the topic. If you're telling a story, yes, there are other people involved, but you're not going to be like insulting them or talking about how much you don't like them or that kind of thing. Okay, that's what I mean by that. You also want to avoid what's called dialect. So if you have dialogue in your essay, people talking to each other, you might fall into some dialect, but dialect is language that comes from a particular area. This is things like y'all, right? If we're talking about Southern stuff. This is like around here in Montana, where I am, we're going to say things like, I seen a polecat crossing the creek. Okay, and yes, we'd probably say crossing. Technically, this should be I saw, and I've heard like 4 different ways that people define polecat. Okay, I saw a skunk crossing the creek, and honestly, around here, people would say crick. Okay, so this is dialectic. This is how folks talk in a particular area, but this is the appropriate diction, and this is how we should present it to our audience. Okay, there's one other type of diction that might pop up in what you're writing about, which is colloquial diction. Again, I'm from like northwestern Montana, so around here there's a place that we call the Mountain. It's the place where the ski resort is, where everybody goes. The locals refer to it as Big Mountain. It's also known as Whitefish Mountain Resort, but honestly, most of us just call it the Mountain. The problem with that is that the mountain is located in the Flathead Valley, which is surrounded on all sides by mountain ranges. So just saying in my essay, we went to the mountain doesn't help my audience at all, because it could be any one of dozens of mountains that surround where I am. There's a place here also called Flathead Lake, which all the locals just refer to as the lake. But if you were to look at this place on a map, you would find that there are actually dozens of lakes around here, and people could go to any one of those lakes, right? But so when we're talking about the lake, we should refer to it as Flathead Lake. We also have Glacier National Park, which all the locals refer to as the park, but there are dozens of other smaller parks, including neighborhood parks or some other smaller like state parks around. So it's important to distinguish between those things. Wherever you are and whatever you're writing about, remember that folks who are not from that area don't use those same colloquial terms as you do. And so you need to be very specific about, say, what lake or what mountain or what park or whatever it is that you're referring to. Okay, in a town nearby, Missoula, they have something called Malfunction Junction. Nobody else is going to know what Malfunction Junction is unless you've been there, which is an intersection in the middle of Missoula that's pretty wonky and it's difficult to turn onto and find where you're going, that kind of thing. But you'd have to use actual street names. Okay, there's one other type of diction that we often run into. It's called jargon. I come across this a lot when folks are writing about sports. In sports, there are very specific terms that folks use. So for instance, I had somebody writing about football once, and they said that this player could juke. Never heard of that before. I picture a jukebox. It actually means that you can stop and turn and dodge really easily. Somebody else was writing about hockey and said they got a hat trick. And the immediate picture in my head was a magician with a rabbit. Okay, but a hat trick is where the same person gets 3 goals in a row. No matter what you're writing about and what area you're writing into, it's a good thing to use some jargon, just a little bit, to help the reader understand that you know what you're talking about. But if you can avoid the jargon and describe something about your hobby or profession, then do so. To have too much jargon, we're going to end up somewhere in here where it sounds great, but the audience has no idea what you're talking about, or we're going to confuse them with what we're saying.